Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Behind the Scenes of Minecraft Chess. My name is Slime, and today we are going to continue our explanation with what is hopefully the final explanation for the current Minecraft chess game, and then next time we can go into improvements. So, previously we have explained all the scoreboard setup and the resetting of the game. We explained how we detect when two players are ready. We have summoned all these armor stands that are a part of the game. We've set up the initial scores for all of them. We have detected that the player has picked up a skull, and we have detected which are the possible moves for that skull. So that brings us here, where we have again a fill clock, and we are detecting that the white player is moving one of his pieces. So we need to find out when the white player is no longer moving a piece. So in order to do that, we do a similar thing to what we've done before. We set a score for all players of hash skull, piece to be 0. And then we're going to set the score for a player who has a score of at most 1 in the player's scoreboard. So player on the white team, we're going to set the score of hash skull to 1 if she has an item in her inventory that is a chainmail helmet and it's named White Queen. Then we're going to do the same thing for a player who has an inventory with an item in it that is a skull and that has damage 0. So that would mean a skull like one of the ones on the white team. The skulls on the black team will have a different damage value because they are different kinds of skulls. And we're going to do the same thing for the white king named chainmail helmet. So that brings us to a situation where the player has a scoreboard value of hash skull equals 1 if he has a skull in his inventory, or a skull or a chainmail helmet, so a move. Now on the other side, we're going to set all the armor stands to be fully disabled. You can't interact with them at all. And then we're going to set any armor stand with a score of at least 1 in the selected piece scoreboard to be enabled as the head slot and allowing placing skulls there. So you can put your move back. You can regret your pickup. And then we're going to set any armor stand that is named S_move to allow you to exchange the head slot with that. So you're allowed to make any blank move. And finally, to get the striking move to behave correctly, we are going to execute a command for an armor stand that has a score on the side scoreboard of at least 1. Score in selectable scoreboard of at least 1, so it's a selectable piece on the black side. And we're going to detect that it's standing on top of a redstone block, and if so, we're going to set the entity data of all the armor stands in a radius of 0, so on the same block as that one. That is an armor stand, and that has a score of selectable, that is 1. And then we're going to set the disabled slot of that 2 to be the same score as the last one, which means you can exchange heads with it. So after this command, we're in a situation where the only armor stands that you can exchange or place the heads on are the ones that either regret your move and put your head back on the armor stand you took it from, or execute a valid move. And you won't be able to interact with any of the other armor stands. Now we're going to run a test for command for a player that has a score of at most 0 in the hash skull scoreboard and is on a white team. So that means you're not holding a skull that is a valid move. You could be holding an enemy skull because you changed it, or you could be holding an S-move chainmail helmet. That's okay. That this doesn't get you a score on the scoreboard. What gets you a score on the scoreboard is you are holding a move that you picked up from one of your own pieces. So this is testing for that we have actually made our move. If that's the case, we're going to fill a line of redstone. So we're going to run a bunch of commands as soon as we have detected that you've placed down your skull. We're setting the success count of this block. And then we're going to set one block to air to stop the fill clock that we're running. Which is the next one? This one. Hold on. We also need to detect and execute some commands. If you have reset your move, you've put your skull back where you took it from. So we're going to set the score of the selected piece in the reset scoreboard to 1. If it has an equipment that is a chainmail helmet. And we're going to set its score in the reset scoreboard to 1 if it has an equipment that is a skull. So if you've placed the skull back on the piece where you took it from, that armor stand will get a score of 1 in the reset scoreboard. So that allows us to then execute commands on that later. And then finally we're going to execute a command for any entity that has a score of at least 1 in the reset scoreboard. And if that's the case, we're going to fill a line of blocks with redstone blocks. And that will execute a bunch of commands. And that happens to be these commands. And what we do is we reset the score of the selected piece back to 0. We reset the score of the selected piece in the reset scoreboard back to 0. We reset the score of the selected banner back to 0. We reset the score of the selected extra back to 0. We reset the score of the selected horse back to 0. And then we place the command block back so that we can restart the fill clock that drives the state of you needing to select a skull to make you move. We clear the player's inventory, and then finally we set a redstone block that kickstarts the fill clock. So now you would be back in your white player should make a move state over there. And then we fill these blocks under here with glowstone again. Now, what happens when you place the skull was we filled a long line of redstone, and that is this little monstrosity. So, skull placed. Now we need to figure out what happened, which was the selected move. And to do that, we're going to start with setting the selected move score to 0 for all the scoreboards named s_move. And then we're going to try to find out which one was the selected move. So we're going to set any armor stand named s_move to 1 in the selected move scoreboard if it has an equipment that is a skull, or that includes a skull, that has a damage value of 0, and a tag with a display name which is white pawn. So if you have placed a white pawn skull on top of any s_move armor stand, that is the selected move. And if that's the case, then we're also going to run this command, which sets the entity data of the selected piece. So the one that, so remember that the selected piece is the one you picked up the skull from in the first place. We're going to set its equipment list, and we're going to set it to exactly the same thing as it was when we summoned the armor stand. So if we go back over to the board, oh, now it's the black player's turn. And we're back at the start of the game. So if I pick up this skull, I'm holding a skull named White Pawn. The selected piece will be this armor stand. However, if I right click here, this invisible armor stand with this chainmail helmet will become the selected move. So we'll have selected piece, selected move. Even if I teleport, so the end goal here is to teleport this old guy over to this place. But as you may notice, this guy now has no head because I stole it. Which means we need to run this command way over here so that he gets his head back. We want him to look just the way he did when we started the game. There's no way to move that item so we're going to test for all the kinds of pieces separately here, and we're going to test for each one being successful, and then we're going to be putting the equipment back the way it was when we summoned them. Now on the other side, we have this command that sets the score of any entity with a score in the side scoreboard of at least 1, so any black piece to selected move, if it has an equipment that includes a skull that has a damage value of 0 and the display tag of white pawn. So this is the case that you're striking an enemy piece, and that piece now becomes the selected move. So as you can imagine, these are all the different kinds of moves. So we have pawn, rook, bishop, knight, queen, and king. So now we're going to teleport the selected piece to the selected move. So that's easy enough. And then we're going to fill a new line of redstone up. So we're going to execute new commands when that's happened. And I think I forgot to mention, but these secondary blocks are all just to reset the success count of this first block. And the same thing on this side. We reset the success count of this block. And of course this one is 2. Okay, now we're going to do something funny. We're going to execute a command for the selected move. And we're going to set a block that is at the same position as that move, but at height 49 to be a redstone block. So if you recall, we have a big room down in the basement where we have 2 armor stands, one called W_en passant and one called B_en passant. So now we're setting a block of the floor of that room to be a redstone block. And this, of course, is to enable us to identify en passant moves down the line. Now, we're going to execute another command for the selected move. And we're going to teleport any entity that is on the same square and has a type of entity horse to a position of 0, 1, 0. So way back at the start of the series, I showed you a room down near the bottom of the world, which is actually open to the void. And we used that to teleport any horse that you strike down into that to avoid having it drop leather and scream when it dies. And then we're going to kill any armor stand called S_move. We're going to clone the board back to a pristine state as it was when we started. And we're going to execute one final command for the selected move entity, and that will kill any entity in a radius of 0, so any entity on the same block that has a score and the side scoreboard of at least 1. So any entity that is still on the same square as the selected move and is a black piece, we're going to kill off. And then, as you can see, this used to take a whole lot more space. That has now been made a fair bit more efficient, but way over here we have a command block that fills this all up with glowstone again. Now remember this command block that placed a line of redstone somewhere. That would be these glowstone blocks that are replaced with the redstone blocks. So we're running all of these commands. So the distinction here is all of these commands run whenever you've placed a skull. That could mean that you've placed it back. It could actually mean that you've thrown the skull out of your inventory. All it really means is you're no longer holding a skull. Whereas these command blocks will only run when we're sure that you've done a move and we have actually teleported your selected piece into the position of the selected move. But now we need to do some cleanup. So we're going to run a command for the selected piece, and we're going to teleport it to height 81. Remember that the armor stands for the different pieces are on slightly different heights, so we need to adjust it so that the pieces end back up on the board. So for instance, if I teleported this pawn that I'm holding to this knight, it would be floating a bit above the ground. And that we don't want, so we teleport it back to height 81 where it belongs. And then we teleport it also to a rotation of 0, 0, because if we teleport this pawn to this knight, it's going to end up pointing that way rather than this way, as a white piece should. So we have to reset the rotation. And then we're going to teleport any extra piece to the selected piece. So we want to get our extra stuff along with us. And if that's happened, then we want to do the same thing for that. We want to get that onto the right height. And then reset the success count of this block. Now, we're going to teleport any selected piece that is also a knight to the same position, but at y81.5 for the same reason. We want the knights to be at the correct height. For the same way, we're going to teleport any selected queen to a height of 81.25, because that's the one that is the queen is actually the crown one. It's the armor stand that only has a chainmail helmet, and the same goes for the king. And now we're going to teleport any selected horse to be at the same place as the selected piece, and if that happens, then we're also going to put the horse back on the ground and reset the success count of this block. And then, as you might have guessed, we should also teleport the selected banner to be at the same place as the selected piece, and if that happens, then we teleport the selected banner to a height of 80.6. So the banner is stuck into the ground a bit to look nice. And then we reset the success count of this block. And now we need some special logic. So we're going to execute a command for a selected piece that is also a king that has a score of 0 in the has moved scoreboard, and that is at the exact location of x equals 6, y equals 81, and z equals 0, within 0 blocks of that. And for that very specific piece, we're going to teleport a rook at the exact coordinates of x equals 7, y equals 81, z equals 0 in a radius of 0 for that one block. So any rook standing exactly there to 2 blocks in the x direction negative. So what we're doing is saying if this king has moved to this square and it hasn't moved before, then we should take this rook and teleport that here. So that's the castling move, and as you may guess, there will be a second castling move as well. Whoops. And this is pretty much the same command, but different coordinates in it to move the other rook. So now it's time to deal with en passant again. We're going to use the redstone block that we just placed down in the basement room. So we're going to execute a command for the armor stand named b_en passant, and we're going to detect whether on height 49 where it is and one step forwards in Z there is a redstone block. So if that's the case, we're going to execute a command that is on height 81 in the same place as the ampersand marker, and then we're going to kill any entity on that block which has a score in the side scoreboard of at least 1. And because it's an ampersand move, we know that will be a pawn, so we don't need to teleport horses and all that other stuff. And then we're going to run a command for a selected piece that is also a pawn, and detect whether the block that is 1 step ahead of it and 1 step below. So if the square on the board 1 step down, 1 step forward is a stone block. And that would actually mean that it's part of the edge. So these are all stone blocks. It's one of the new versions of stone. And that would mean that the armor stand has now reached the end of the board. And if it's a pawn, then we're going to do a promotion. So we're going to fill a whole bunch of blocks with redstone blocks, and then we're going to execute a bunch of command blocks from that. And now we're going to finally set the score for the selected piece to 1 in the has moved scoreboard, so we know that it's moved. And now we're going to run a command for the w_ampersand armor stand, where we detect whether it's standing on stone. And if it is, that means it's not standing on the redstone block that we just placed. So if that's the case, then we're going to teleport it away to a corner of the room where it's definitely outside the board. So we're teleporting it to -2, -2 at height 50. We placed the ampersand armor stand in the same place, but at height 50 as the opening move for pawn. So this means if I didn't make that move, we're going to remove that, so we can't make an ampersand move. And then we're going to clear the inventory of the white player, fill the entire room in the basement with stone on the floor, so we get rid of the redstone block we placed. And now we're going to execute a command for the player of the white team. And we're going to detect whether this block is a glowstone block. So this is a way of testing whether we are doing a promotion or not. So if that block is a glowstone block, then we're not doing a promotion, and in that case we should move on with the game. Otherwise the game has to stall until the player has selected his promotion. But if it's glowstone blocks, we're not doing that, then we can keep going, and what we're going to do is fill another row of blocks with redstone, and it will be these blocks, so that we can keep going with the game. So let's deal with these first. And these are what are going to happen when you are done moving your piece and there's no promotion, or when you're done with your promotion. So this is the end of the turn for the white player. So we're going to start by announcing that it's the black player's turn now. We're going to place a command block down to start the fill clock for the black player, and this will be way over here. White's move, put down at floor. Black's move. So this is the exact same score commands, but adjusted for the black player. And then of course we're going to kickstart that with a redstone block. And we're going to fill these 3 with glowstone. And then we have on delays from this some repeaters that will execute another line of blocks after all of this has happened. The reason for this delay is to make sure that all of these teleports have had time to happen properly, and that remember that we're here in these secondary blocks, we're still adjusting the positions of the selected piece, the selected horse, and so on. So these commands will reset the score of the selected horse back to 0, the score of the selected extra back to 0, the score of the selected banner back to 0, and the score of the selected piece back to 0. And that leaves us with only promotions left. So these command blocks will run if there's time for a promotion. And what we're going to do is we're going to replace your inventory for the player on the white team on the first hotbar slot with a skull, and that skull owner is going to be an Enderman, so it's an Enderman skull, and it's going to be a one named Queen, and then we're going to do the same. We're going to do a golem head for Knight, a normal skull for Rook, and a different skull for Bishop. So at that point you have 4 different skulls in your first 4 inventory slots, and you can pick one of them. And then we're going to summon an armor stand on the same place as the selected piece. So this is where you teleported the pawn just now. We're going to summon an armor stand called s_promote, and it's going to be an invisible armor stand. It's going to have a bit of equipment that is only a golden helmet, and it's going to be named promote. And if we've done that, we're going to kill the selected piece. So we make sure that we first manage to summon the new armor stand, then we can kill off the pawn and reset the success count of this block. And then we're going to set a command block that starts a fill clock. Set a score for the s_promote armor stand we just created to 1 in the blink scoreboard. So that'll be just an effect that we're doing to show that there's an action that needs to happen. And we're going to place down a redstone block to start the fill clock and replace these blocks with glowstone. And here's the fill clock that we're talking about. So this fills with obsidian. This block will be one that fills these obsidian blocks with redstone, placed from over here. And we're going to execute all these commands while we're waiting for promotion to happen. So the way this works is we're detecting the selected promotion by using a bit mask. And now I have a cat in front of my screen. Come on. Move over, kitty. So we start by setting the promotion score of the white player to 15. 15 happens to be 8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1, which are 4 bits of 1 if you count binary. And these two will be the fill clock. And what we want to do now is we want to... Oh, apparently I've left one empty. So we're going to disable the interaction with all the armor stands, but we want to allow you to interact with the one called s_promote. So that's the only one that you're supposed to interact with. And okay, let's get rid of that one. This is confusing me. Now, let's do this side first. We are going to remove 8 from the score of the white player in the promotion scoreboard if you have a skull in your inventory that has a tag name of Queen. So if you still have the skull that says Queen, we're going to remove 8. If you still have a skull called Rook, we're going to remove 4. That's not the one I wanted. If you have a skull name with a display name of Knight, then we're going to remove 2. And if you have a skull with the name of Bishop, we're going to remove 1. Now what this means is, because we're using a bit mask like this, and we're removing the 4 bits separately, what will have happened at this point is either your score is 0, which means you still have all the skulls, or you've used 1, and in that case we have a score that's either 1, 2, 4, or 8. And then we skipped over this command that adds 1 to the blink scoreboard. And that leads into this command that executes for any entity named s_promote that has a score of blink that is at least 10, and a score of blink that is at most 10, so a score that's exactly 10. And if that's the case, we're going to run an entity data command that replaces its equipment with an iron helmet. And then again, we're going to execute a command for s_promote armor stand that has a score of blink that is at least 20, and if that's the case, we're going to replace its equipment with golden helmet. So every 10 ticks, we are replacing its helmet with an iron or a golden one. So it will be blinking sort of gold to iron. Now we're going to execute a command for a white player that has a score of at least 1 in the promotion scoreboard. So that means you've put down one of the skulls. And if that's the case, we're going to fill a line of blocks with redstone blocks, and those are, of course, these blocks. And then as one final thing to do on this fill clock, we are going to execute a command for S-promote if its score of blink has become 21, and in that case we're going to set it back to 1. So in case you've selected your promotion, we're going to turn off this fill clock. Now we're going to execute a command for the white player that has a score in the promotion scoreboard that is at least 2 and at most 2. And that's the only way you can test for the score being exactly 2. So for that player, we execute another command, and we execute that command on the s_promote armor stand. And in that place, we're going to summon an entity horse with no AI, and this is exactly the same summon command that we run to summon a horse for a knight. So if in case your score in the promotion scoreboard is 2, you've selected to summon a knight, and then we need to summon its horse. And then of course we need to summon the armor stand for the knight, so this will work exactly the same way. Execute the command for the player if the promotion score is exactly 2, then execute for the s_promote armor stand, and then summon. And the summon command will be identical to the one over there. And of course if your score is 8, then you've selected to summon a queen, so we're going to do exactly the same thing there. Summon 2 armor stands. And then if you selected to summon a knight, then we need to actually set it as a knight. So we're going to set all the entities within the radius to be score 1 in the knight scoreboard. And if we just summon the queen, we need to do the same. We need to set those pieces to have score of queen. And then we have similar commands for summoning bishops and rooks, except those are only 1 armor stand, so we don't need 2. And we need to set their scores. Then we're going to consider ourselves to be done with the move, so we're going to fill up these close zone blocks over there, so we run those commands to move the round onto the black player. We're going to mark whatever we just summoned to be of side 0, so anything that's standing on the same square as the s_promote armor stand is going to be set aside 0. And we need to set up its status as selectable next and so on. So way over here, there's a line of command blocks that do just that. So we're going to fill a part of this line. So just the final piece of this line, that is, if you recall, the one that summons the initial ones, and we're going to set those to be redstone blocks to run those again. So we don't have to copy all those command blocks over here. And then we're going to clear your inventory and kill off the s_promote's armor stand before setting all of this back to glowstone. And that, my friends, means that we've gone through everything in this whole set of command blocks, everything you can see now. Now, as I mentioned, there's another layer to this, and that's the black player's moves, but they are essentially identical to this, but all the coordinates switched out so that they reference things on the bottom floor instead of the upper floor. There are a few quirks here and there because you have to teleport them to be 180 degrees instead of 0, but on the whole, that's the entire game. Now, this was quite a long episode, but we have managed to cover the entire game, so next time we will be able to start looking at improvements, looking at bug fixes, and moving on past version 1 of the chess game. As always, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. I have been Sliced Lime. See you next time.